Some nights promise magic. Others steal everything. So fast the heart takes years to catch up. The December cold bit at the faces of pedestrians hurrying along the sidewalks of Manhattan. But on that Friday in 1990, the discomfort didn't matter. Times Square was alive. The luminous signs blinked in. Red, blue, and neon yellow reflecting in the dirty puddles left by the afternoon's light rain. The smell of baked pretzels mixed with the steam rising from subway grates, but there was also the acrid odor of bus exhaust and the overly cheap perfume of street vendors. A distant siren cut through just one of the city's sounds, but on that night, it sounded like a warning no one knew how to interpret. Hannah Walker held her daughter's hand tightly as she dodged a group of Japanese tourists taking pictures in front of the theater where Cats was playing. She could feel Sophia's small, warm palm inside hers, the 5 tiny fingers squeezing back with absolute trust. The girl couldn't take her eyes off the giant advertisements above them. Her lips were slightly parted, almost paralyzed by the grandeur of it all. Hannah squeezed her daughter's hand 3 times, their secret code for, "I love you." Sophia squeezed back 3 times without taking her eyes off the lights. "Mommy, is that thing up there moving by itself?" Sophia asked, pointing to an animated billboard where a bottle of Coca-Cola slowly spun on itself. "It is, my love. It's like magic, isn't it?" Hannah replied, smiling as she adjusted her daughter's red beanie against the cold wind that swept down between the buildings. "When I grow up, I'm going to do real magic. I'm going to make it snow every Christmas day," Sophia said, with that childhood seriousness that breaks any mother's heart. Hannah laughed, softly, pulling the girl closer. "I know you will, my love. You can do anything." Paul Walker was a few steps behind, carrying a Polaroid camera slung around his neck, his hands stuffed in the pockets of his worn-out coat. He was a tall man with broad shoulders, but his posture betrayed chronic exhaustion. Driving a taxi for 12 hours a day left its marks on his spine, in his always red eyes, in the increasingly short conversations at home. He watched Hannah and Sophia ahead, and a thought crossed his mind like a shadow. How many nights like this have I missed? How many times had he promised to be there and failed? But tonight would be different. He had sworn it. He had promised he would take Sophia to see the lights. And there they were. "Hold on, Han. Let me get a picture of her with that cup noodle sign in the back," Paul asked, quickening his pace to catch up with them. Hannah stopped beside a newsstand while Paul crouched in front of his daughter, adjusting the camera's focus. The famous giant cup noodles billboard, with its steam rising in pulsating neon, glowed behind Sophia like a futuristic frame. The girl suddenly became serious, as if she understood the importance of the moment. Her small face, framed by brown curls escaping her beanie, stood still before the lens. She didn't smile. She just watched her father with those deep, dark eyes, taking everything in. The flash went off. The photo emerged with a mechanical whir sliding out of the camera's side slot. Paul took the white square and shook it in the air, smiling. "It's going to be beautiful. I'll put it on the fridge as soon as we get home." They continued walking, crossing the street toward the heart of Times Square, where the crowd thickened. There were entire families, couples holding hands, groups of teenagers laughing too loudly. A street artist dressed as the Statue of Liberty stood motionless on a wooden box while children tossed coins at his feet. A saxophonist played Silent Night with a jazzy accent that echoed between the buildings. The sound was beautiful, but it competed with horns, voices, the constant noise of traffic. Above it all, the iconic Marlboro Man billboard, already in its final months before being banned, watched over the city with his distant, indifferent gaze. Hannah felt Sophia's body lean to the right, pulling on her hand. "Look, Mom, there's a giant man over there." It was an inflatable Santa Claus swaying at the entrance of a toy store. Hannah laughed, but as she looked ahead, she realized the crowd was closing in. A group of college students ran past them, laughing and pushing one another. She squeezed Sophia's hand harder 3 times. "Stay close to me, okay?" "Okay, Mommy." Paul was a few steps behind now, trying to put the camera back in its bag while dodging a hot dog cart. Hannah looked back, checking if he was still there. He waved. She smiled and turned forward again. That's when she saw the storefront window. It was a camera and electronics shop with illuminated displays full of camcorders and stacked TVs. On one of them, Madonna's Vogue music video played on a silent loop. Hannah stopped for a moment, hypnotized by the image. She had always wanted a camcorder, always dreamed of recording Sophia's birthdays, Christmases, future graduations. One day, maybe a future Christmas, maybe when Paul got that job at the logistics company. In the reflection of the glass, she could see herself and Sophia side by side, like in a magic mirror, two silhouettes cut out by the neon lights. She let go of Sophia's hand for 3 seconds, just 3. The time it took to take the Polaroid out of her purse, adjust the strap, and look back at the window, imagining. When she turned back, the reflection in the glass showed only her. Sophia was gone. Hannah's heart stopped, literally. For a whole second, she couldn't breathe. Her eyes swept the surrounding crowd. Unfamiliar faces, hundreds of them moving in every direction. Beanies, coats, children, yes, but none with a red beanie, none with brown curls. "Sophia?" she called, but her voice came out weak, almost a whisper. "Sophia." Now louder. Paul noticed. He dropped the bag on the ground and rushed forward, spinning his body in every direction. "Where is she? Where's Sophia?" "She was right here. She was holding my hand," Hannah screamed, and her voice tore through the air with a force that made some people around them stop and stare. A strong smell of subway smoke suddenly rose from a grate at her feet, mixing with the scent of caramelized onions from a nearby cart. The surrounding lights began to flash, red, white, blue, directly in her face, like strobe lights. Her peripheral vision started to narrow. There was only the scream trapped in her throat and her daughter's name getting lost in the crowd. "Sophia!" Paul bellowed, with an intensity that made the saxophonist stop playing. The crowd began to part. People turned, confused, frightened. What happened? Is it a child? Did anyone see anything? Oh my God, is she a kidnapper? "Call the police!" Hannah was running now, pushing people, looking down, searching among the adults' legs. Her breath came in short, panting bursts. Maybe Sophia had bent down to pick something up. Maybe she was hiding. Maybe. Has anyone seen a little girl? A 5-year-old girl, red beanie, brown hair, Paul shouted to everyone, but the answers were always the same. Blank faces, heads shaking no, looks of pity. Hannah felt her legs give way. The world around her began to spin. The neon lights, which seconds before had seemed magical, were now violent, aggressive, flashing like fire alarms. The sound of the traffic turned into an unbearable roar. She fell to her knees in the middle of the sidewalk, her hands covering her face. "My God, someone took my daughter!" The NYPD arrived in less than 10 minutes. 4 squad cars surrounded the block. Uniformed officers began to block the subway entrances, questioning security guards and pedestrians. Radios crackled. Orders were shouted. A perimeter was established, but it was already too late. Sophia Walker had disappeared in the midst of thousands of people, swallowed by the very city that had promised to enchant her. It was into this chaos that Frank Delgado arrived. The sound of the gray sedan's door slamming cut through the air like a period. He got out of the car in a black overcoat that had seen better days and an expression that seemed carved from stone. Delgado was 52, with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that carried the weight of 3 decades on the NYPD. As he walked toward the scene, his right hand instinctively touched the inner pocket of his jacket, where he kept a faded photograph of a 7-year-old girl. Another case, another family, another failure he carried like an invisible scar. He was known in the department as the guy who never lets go. Missing children cases were his specialty, or his curse, depending on who you asked. He approached Hannah, who was now sitting in the back of a squad car, shivering even with a police officer's coat over her shoulders. Paul was beside her, holding his wife's hand so tightly his knuckles were white. Delgado crouched in front of them, bringing himself to Hannah's eye level. His gaze scanned her face like a scanner, registering every detail, every tremor, every sign of shock. My name is Frank Delgado. I'm a detective with the Missing Persons Unit. I know this is impossible right now, but I need you to take a deep breath and tell me exactly what happened." Hannah tried to speak, but the words came out broken, choked by sobs. Paul took over, recounting every detail. The photo, the storefront, the 3 seconds. Delgado listened in silence, but his eyes never stopped moving. He observed everything: the position of the storefront, the flow of the crowd, the security cameras on the surrounding buildings, the angle of the streets. When Paul finished, Delgado placed a firm hand on his shoulder and another on Hannah's hand. "I've lost children before, and I swore I never would again. Nobody vanishes in this city without a trace, and I'm very good at following traces." He paused, looking directly into both their eyes. "I will find your daughter, Mrs. Walker, even if I have to turn New York upside down." He stood up and walked to the middle of Times Square, which was now almost empty, cordoned off by the police. The lights continued to flash, indifferent. Behind him, a huge electronic billboard displayed a Christmas ad. "Make this Christmas unforgettable." The cold wind lifted the hem of Delgado's overcoat as he slowly turned, observing every corner, every exit, every shadow. Somewhere in this city, Sophia Walker was alive. He was sure of it, and he was going to bring her back, or die trying. Subscribe to follow how this investigation changed New York, and how a case forgotten for 5 years found justice. The first 48 hours determine everything. After that, the child becomes a statistic, and I don't work with statistics, I work with promises. Frank Delgado didn't sleep that night. At 11:47 p.m., he was sitting in a cramped room at the 14th Precinct, surrounded by maps of Manhattan spread across the table, cold. Coffee cups piled next to a full ashtray. Cigarette smoke rose in slow spirals toward the yellow-stained ceiling. Around him, 4 detectives reviewed statements, made calls, cross-referenced information. But Delgado was quiet, his eyes fixed on a Polaroid photo Paul Walker had given him hours earlier. Sophia Walker, 5 years old, red beanie, brown curls, dark eyes that seemed too big for her small face. In the photo, she was serious, almost solemn, with the giant cup noodles sign glowing behind her like a futuristic halo. Delgado turned the photo upside down, sideways, brought it closer, brought it to his eyes. He was looking for something, any detail the parents hadn't noticed. A reflection, a shadow, someone in the background. Nothing. He put the photo back on the table and lit another cigarette. His mind was already piecing together the puzzle. 3 seconds. That was the window. 3 damn seconds between Hannah letting go of her daughter's hand and realizing she was gone. Enough time for what? For someone to grab her and disappear into the crowd? For her to wander off on her own? To have walked into a store? Delgado picked up the phone and dialed the number for the forensics lab. They answered on the 3rd ring. "How much longer for the security tapes?" he asked without preamble. "We're collecting them now, detective. There's a camera at the theater entrance, at the jewelry store on 45th, at the subway station, and on 2 commercial buildings. We should have everything digitized by tomorrow morning. I need it yesterday." "Understood, I'll make it a priority." Delgado hung up and looked at the map. He had marked the exact spot where Sophia disappeared with a red pen. The electronics store window at the corner of Broadway and 44th. From there, he drew concentric circles representing the distances a 5-year-old could travel in 3 seconds, 10 meters. Maybe 15 if she was running. But Sophia wasn't running. No one had seen a child running. That meant one thing. Someone had carried her. Fast, efficient, without drawing attention. Delgado stood up and went to the whiteboard on the wall, where he began to list possibilities. Hypothesis 1. Planned abduction. Was someone following the family? Did they know the Walkers' routine? Was there a ransom demand? Hypothesis 2. Crime of opportunity. Predator waiting for a moment of distraction. Child. Alone. Easy target. Times Square. Perfect chaos to disappear. Hypothesis. 3. Sophia wandered off, saw something that caught her eye, entered a store or theater, got lost in the crowd. He crossed out the third hypothesis. A 5-year-old doesn't vanish without a trace. Someone would have seen. Someone would have heard. And the parents said Sophia was obedient, that she never strayed from their side. The door to the room opened. Detective Maria Santos entered. A woman in her early 40s, hair pulled back in a tight bun, her expression tired but determined. She was carrying a clipboard, full of papers. "We finished interviewing everyone who was in the area," she said, tossing the clipboard on the table. 63 witnesses. Nobody saw anything useful. Some people remember seeing the girl, yes, but nobody saw her being taken. Nobody saw her crying or screaming. It's as if she evaporated. Delgado nodded slowly. That means whoever took her knew what they were doing. It wasn't improvised. It was fast, clean, invisible. You think it's a professional? Or someone who's done this before? He stubbed out his cigarette forcefully in the ashtray. Did you check the list of known predators in the area? We're on it. There are 17 registered within a 5-kilometer radius. We're going to knock on every one of their doors tonight. Good. And the parents? Any inconsistencies? Maria shook her head. Nothing. They're destroyed, Frank. It's not an act. Paul Walker almost fainted during his statement. Hannah can't stop crying. I checked their finances. They don't have the money to be a target for a ransom kidnapping. Paul drives a taxi. Hannah works part-time at a laundromat. They're clean. Delgado took a deep breath. Good. That ruled out family involvement, which was always the first thing to investigate. Now he could focus on what really mattered, finding Sophia before it was too late. Dawn broke with a thin fog covering Manhattan. Delgado was back in Times Square at 6 a.m., when the city was still sleeping and the neon lights had lost some of their brilliance against the graying sky. He walked slowly along the sidewalk, retracing the walker's steps. He stopped exactly where Hannah had stopped, in front of the electronics store window. He looked at his reflection in the glass. He imagined Sophia beside him. He turned. He looked back. How many people were there that night? 2,000? 3,000? How many of them had seen Sophia? How many had seen the man, or woman, who took her? He observed the security cameras on the surrounding buildings. 5 in total, different angles. Maybe one of them had captured something. It had to have. At 9 a.m., Delgado was back at the precinct, in a dark room lit only by the bluish glow of 4 monitors. The video technician, a young man named Danny with thick-lensed glasses, sat before the controls, fast-forwarding and rewinding the footage in slow motion. This one is from the jewelry store, Danny explained, pointing to the left monitor. It has a partial view of the sidewalk where the girl disappeared. Delgado leaned forward, his eyes glued to the screen. He saw Hannah and Sophia walking, Paul right behind. He saw Hannah stop in front of the window. He saw Sophia beside her. Then, Hannah turned to fiddle with her purse, and when the camera angle shifted, Sophia was no longer there. Run it again. Slower. Danny complied. Frame by frame. Delgado saw the exact moment. Sophia was there. Then she wasn't. Between the 2 frames there was something. A shadow. A movement. Someone passing. Between the camera and the girl. Stop there. Zoom in on that. The image became grainy, pixelated, but it was possible to see. A tall figure, wearing something dark, maybe a long coat, passing very close to Sophia. In the next frame, both the figure and the girl were gone. Can you enhance the image? Delgado asked, his voice tense. I can try, but it'll take time. The quality is bad. Do what you can, and show me the other cameras. They spent the next 2 hours reviewing all the recordings. On the footage from the subway station, captured 7 minutes after the disappearance, Delgado saw something that made his stomach clench. A tall man, dark coat carrying a large backpack, hurrying down the stairs. The backpack looked full, heavy. Print this, every angle you have of this guy. Danny worked quickly. In minutes, Delgado had 6 black and white printouts. The man's face was never clearly visible. He kept his head down, as if he knew where the cameras were. But there was something. A tattoo on his neck, partially visible in one of the images. Zoom in here. Danny enlarged it. The tattoo looked like a snake, or maybe a dragon. Hard to tell with the poor resolution. Delgado took the photos and left the room. Maria Santos was in the hallway on the phone. When she saw Delgado's expression, she hung up immediately. Did we find something? Delgado showed her the photos. This guy entered the subway 7 minutes after Sofia disappeared, carrying a large backpack. Tattoo on his neck, never shows his face, knows exactly where the cameras are. Maria studied the images. This isn't proof. No, but it's a start. He pointed to the tattoo. We're going to find out who he is. Meanwhile, the story had already leaked to the press. At 11 a.m. that morning, the headline of the New York Post blared, "Girl vanishes in Times Square. Police have no leads." Reporters camped out in front of the precinct. TV cameras surrounded the Walkers' home in the Bronx. The pressure mounted with each passing hour. Delgado ignored all of it. He had only one focus, the tattoo. He called every contact he had on the streets, informants, ex-cons, tattoo shop owners. He sent copies of the image to every precinct in the city. Someone somewhere had to recognize that design. The answer came at 3 p.m. A tattoo artist from Brooklyn called. "I know that work. It's Nico's. He does illegal tattoos in a basement in Bed-Stuy, Russian style. Very specific." Delgado wrote down the address. 20 minutes later, he and Maria were in an unmarked car, crossing the Brooklyn Bridge toward the address. The sky was dark, heavy with snow that wouldn't fall. The city seemed to be holding its breath. When they arrived at the location, a worn-out brick building with windows boarded up, Delgado felt that familiar sensation. He was close, very close. He knocked on the door. No one answered. He knocked again, harder. "NYPD, open the door." A man opened it, thin, tattoos covering his arms. He looked at the detectives with suspicion. "We're looking for information about a tattoo," Delgado said, showing the photo. "Did you do this?" The man studied the image. He hesitated. Then he nodded. "I did. About 3 years ago." "Who's the owner?" Silence. Delgado stepped closer. "A 5-year-old girl is missing. If you know something and don't talk, you'll be charged with accessory." The man swallowed hard. Then he whispered a name. "Vincent Marlowe. In New York, everyone has a secret. Some are small, pathetic, others destroy lives. And when you start digging, you find that the worst secrets don't belong to one person. They belong to an entire network." The name echoed in Frank Delgado's mind like a funeral bell. Vincent Marlowe. Back in the car, with the snow finally starting to fall in heavy flakes over Brooklyn, Delgado called the precinct and asked them to run the name through the system. Maria drove in silence, her eyes fixed on the slippery road, but he could feel the tension radiating from her. They both knew they were entering dangerous territory, that moment in an investigation when you stop looking for clues and start following real people, people who might react, disappear, or attack. The response came in less than 5 minutes. Detective Morrison from Delgado's team was breathless on the other end of the line. "Frank, you're going to want to hear this. Vincent Marlowe, 38, extensive criminal record. 2 arrests for armed robbery in the 90s. 1 for illegal firearm possession in 2001. Served 3 years at Rikers. Released in 2004 for good behavior." Morrison paused. "But there's something else. In 2006 he was questioned, but not charged, in connection with the disappearance of a child in Queens." Delgado's stomach tightened. "What child?" 7-year-old boy. Vanished from a park. Never found. Marlowe was a regular at the park. Someone had seen him talking to kids before, but there was no proof, so they let him go. "Current address?" "I've got 2. A registered apartment on the Lower East Side, 247 Delancey Street. And a warehouse in Red Hook that's in his name. Probably a front for something. I want you to wait for backup before." Delgado hung up. Maria glanced at him. "He said to wait for backup, didn't he?" "He did. And we're going to ignore that?" A 5-year-old girl has been missing for over 24 hours, Maria. Every minute counts. If Marlowe is involved and realizes we're onto him, he'll disappear. Or worse. Delgado checked his weapon. A Glock 19 he'd carried for 15 years. We'll go to the apartment first. If he's not there, we'll try the warehouse. Maria sighed but didn't argue. She'd known Delgado long enough to know that once he made a decision, there was no changing his mind. The building on Delancey Street was a faded red brick structure, 6 stories, with rusty fire escapes hanging from the facade like metal scars. The lobby smelled of mold and urine. There was no doorman. The elevator was broken, a torn sign warning, "Use stairs." Apartment 4B. Delgado and Maria went up in silence, their guns holstered but ready. On the 4th floor, the hallway was narrow and poorly lit, just a single weak bulb flickering in the ceiling. Door 4B at the end of the hall, peeling green paint, a cracked peephole. Delgado positioned himself on one side of the door, Maria on the other. He listened. Silence. He knocked. "Vincent Marlowe? NYPD. We need to talk." Nothing. He knocked again, harder. "Mr. Marlowe, if you're in there, open the door. We just want to ask a few questions." Still. Nothing. Delgado tried the doorknob. Locked. He looked at Maria, who nodded. He took a step back and kicked the door hard, just below the lock. The old wood gave way with a crack, the door swinging open. "NYPD, anyone home?" The apartment was dark. Delgado entered first, gun drawn, doing a quick scan of the living room. Old sofa, tube TV turned off, piles of yellowed newspapers, overflowing ashtray, the smell of cigarettes and something else. Something Swedish, almost chemical, that he couldn't place. Maria went to the bedroom. Delgado checked the kitchen, a sink full of dirty dishes, a tandy, humming refrigerator, its door ajar revealing beer and leftover Chinese food. "Frank, come see this." He entered the bedroom. The walls were covered with photos. Dozens of them. Photos of children. Children in parks. Children leaving schools. Children playing on sidewalks. All taken from a distance, with a telephoto lens without the kids knowing they were being photographed. In the center of the wall, pinned with thumbtacks, was a larger photo. A girl with brown hair, a red beanie, holding her mother's hand. Sophia Walker. Taken in Times Square, probably the day before she disappeared. Maria covered her mouth with her hand. Oh my God. Delgado felt a wave of cold anger rise up his spine. He approached the wall, studying each photo, each face. There were at least 20 different children there. Some photos were old, faded. Others were recent. He was choosing, Delgado said, his voice low and controlled. Watching, planning. Maria was already on the phone, calling the forensics team. Delgado left the bedroom and began to search the apartment methodically. In the living room, under the sofa, he found a black backpack, the same one he had seen in the subway security footage. It was empty now, but at the bottom there were strands of brown hair. Long. A child's hair. He placed the backpack carefully on the table, using a pen to avoid contaminating potential fingerprints. In the bathroom, inside the cabinet behind the toilet, he found a shoebox. Inside, fake documents. Passports in 3 different names, birth certificates, and a map of New York State with several points marked in red ink. One of them was Red Hook, the warehouse. Delgado returned to the bedroom, where Maria was still on the phone coordinating the arrival of the crime scene unit. He interrupted. Her. He's not here, but I know where he might be. Red Hook, on the southern tip of Brooklyn, was a decaying industrial area, full of abandoned warehouses, deserted docks, and poorly lit streets. At 7:30 p.m., with the night completely fallen and the snow coming down harder, Delgado and Maria parked 2 blocks from the warehouse address. This time, they weren't alone. 4 squad cars followed them, 8 armed officers, all briefed on the situation. No one was taking any chances. If Marlowe had Sophia, and if he was armed, things could get ugly fast. The warehouse was a corrugated metal structure, Two rusty garage doors in the front, high windows caked with grime. A faint light shone from inside, leaking through cracks in the walls. Someone was in there. Delgado gathered the team. 4 at the front entrance, 2 covering the back exit. Maria and I go in first. If you see hostile movement, do not hesitate. But remember, there could be a child inside. Be careful with your shots. Everyone nodded. Delgado checked his gun one more time, took a deep breath. Then he moved toward the warehouse, Maria at his side, their boots sinking into the thin snow. They positioned themselves. On either side of the side door, a dented metal door with a lock that looked new. Delgado didn't waste time. 2 shots at the lock, the metal shattering with sparks. He kicked the door. It swung open. "NYPD, Vincent Marlowe, come out with your hands in the air." An echo in the empty space. Delgado entered, gun raised, quick scan. The warehouse was huge, poorly lit by a few bulbs hanging from old cables. Stacked boxes, a tarp covering something in the corner, the smell of motor oil and mold. And then he heard it. A muffled sound, a whimper. His heart raced. "Sophia?" He ran toward the sound. Maria right behind him. At the back of the warehouse was a wooden door, bolted shut from the outside. Delgado yanked it open. Inside, tied to a chair, with duct tape over her mouth and her eyes wide with terror, was Sophia Walker, alive. Delgado felt a wave of relief so strong it almost knocked him over. He ran in, knelt in front of the girl, and carefully removed the tape from her mouth. "It's okay, Sophia. You're safe now. I'm a police officer. I'm going to take you back to your mommy, okay?" The girl began to cry, deep sobs. Delgado quickly untied her and picked her up. She was trembling, wearing the same clothes from the day she disappeared, but she seemed unharmed. "Maria, call an ambulance and call the parents." Maria ran out. Delgado held Sophia, feeling her little heart hammering against his chest. "You were very brave, Sophia. Very brave." But where was Marlowe? The answer came, in the form of a screech of metal. Delgado turned his head and saw it. At the back of the warehouse, a garage door was opening. A figure running out. "Suspect fleeing through the rear exit," he shouted into his radio. 2 officers gave chase. Delgado heard shouts, a gunshot, then silence. Minutes later, an officer's voice crackled over the radio. "Suspect in custody. I repeat, suspect in custody." Delgado closed his eyes for a second. It was over. Sophia was safe. Marlowe was caught. 2 hours later at the hospital, Hannah and Paul Walker were reunited with their daughter. The scenes of crying, hugging, and kissing were etched into Delgado's memory. Those rare moments when the job was worth it, when he managed to return something precious that had been stolen. But while Sophia was being examined by doctors and comforted by her parents, Delgado was in an interrogation room 6 floors below, facing Vincent Marlowe across a metal table. Marlowe said nothing. He just smiled. A thin, cold smile that made Delgado's blood boil. "You're going to spend the rest of your life in prison," Delgado said calmly. "Kidnapping. Unlawful imprisonment of a minor. Attempting to flee. We're talking decades, Marlowe. You'll never see the light of day again." Marlowe leaned forward, still smiling. "You think I was working alone?" Delgado froze. "What are you talking about?" "The photos in my apartment. You found a lot of them, didn't you? 20? 30 kids?" Marlowe chuckled softly. "Of all of those, how many do you think I took?" Delgado's stomach clenched again. "How many?" Marlowe leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "You want answers? Then give me a deal. Protection, a reduced sentence. Then I'll tell you everything." Delgado stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. He left the room before he did something that could ruin the case. Outside, Maria was waiting for him, her face pale. "Frank, forensics found something at the warehouse, under those tarps." She swallowed hard. They were cages. 5 of them. 3 had evidence they were used recently. Hair. Children's. Clothes. Delgado felt the world spin. Sophia Walker wasn't the first, and Marlowe wasn't alone. The investigation was just beginning. The interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and desperation. Delgado watched Vincent Marlowe through the one-way mirror, his fists clenched at his sides. The man, sitting there, his hands cuffed on the metal table, seemed extraordinarily calm for someone facing charges of kidnapping and possible involvement in a child trafficking ring. "He's playing us," Maria muttered beside him, her arms crossed. "He knows exactly what he's doing." Delgado nodded, not taking his eyes off Marlowe. For the past 3 hours, the man had offered crumbs of information, always conditional on guarantees the DA's office wasn't yet willing to grant. He'd mentioned partial names, vague locations, insinuations of an operation that spanned multiple states. "How many kids?" Delgado finally asked, entering the room with measured steps. Maria followed, closing the door with a definitive click. Marlowe looked up, a ghostly smile playing on his lips. "Detective Delgado, I thought you'd given up on me." "How many kids, Marlowe?" Delgado's voice was like breaking ice. The man tilted his head as if considering a particularly interesting philosophical question. "That depends. How many are you willing to save? Because time is ticking, Detective. Every hour you waste trying to make me talk without offering anything in return, the harder it gets to find them." Maria leaned over the table, invading Marlowe's personal space. "You think you're in a position to negotiate? We have enough evidence to lock you up until you rot." "Evidence of what?" Marlowe laughed, a dry, unpleasant sound. "That I held a child in a warehouse? You'll get me 10 years, maybe 15, with good behavior. But the others..." He paused dramatically. "The others will keep operating. You caught a small fish, detectives. I'm just the janitor." Delgado pulled out a chair and sat down slowly, forcing himself to be calm. He'd seen this kind of manipulation before. Criminals who tried to inflate their own importance, creating elaborate narratives to gain advantages in the system. But something in Marlowe's gaze bothered him. There was a certainty there, a conviction that went beyond common bravado. "Tell me about the others," Delgado said, keeping his tone neutral. "First, I want full immunity. Second, protection. Not just in prison, but my family too. I have an ex-wife in Denver and a 12-year-old daughter." "You have a daughter?" Maria's voice dripped with sarcasm. "And yet, that's exactly why," Marlowe interrupted. And for the first time, something genuine crossed his expression. Fear. "They know about her. If I talk without adequate protection, she disappears. Simple as that." Delgado exchanged a look with Maria. If Marlowe was telling the truth, if there really was a larger organization behind this, they would need to involve the FBI. Interstate trafficking. Cases were outside of local jurisdiction. But that would also mean losing control of the investigation, seeing the case handed over to federal agents while they were sidelined. "Give us something concrete," Delgado said. "A name, a location, something we can verify right now. If it checks out, we'll talk about protection." Marlowe was silent for a long moment, his eyes scanning the ceiling as if making complex calculations. Finally, he sighed. "There's a warehouse in Newark, Industrial Street, near the abandoned shipyards. Number 47 Riverside Drive. The basement has an access through a steel door in the back. The code is 8372. "What are we going to find there?" Maria asked, already taking notes. "I was hoping you wouldn't ask that." Marlowe looked at his own hands. 3 kids. Maybe 4, depending on if... You need to go now. The rotation crew checks the place every 6 hours. The next check-in is in 45 minutes. Delgado was already on his feet. "If this is a lie, if this is a trap..." "It's not," Marlowe cut him off, and there was something broken in his voice now. "I've done a lot of bad things, Detective, but I still have a daughter out there. If cooperating means keeping her safe, then I'll cooperate. Just promise me you'll protect her." Maria rushed out of the room to mobilize a tactical team. Delgado stayed for another moment, studying the man before him. Marlowe no longer looked like the confident predator from the warehouse. He looked small, scared, a pawn in a game that was beyond him. If those kids are there, Delgado said quietly. "I'll do everything in my power to protect your daughter. But if this is a trick, a way to buy time or warn your partners, I swear to God I will personally make sure you never see the light of day again." 20. Minutes later, Delgado was in the passenger seat of an unmarked car speeding across the city. Behind them, 3 black vans carried the SWAT team, all geared up and armed for a confrontation. Maria drove with absolute concentration, weaving through afternoon traffic. The radio crackled with coordinates and confirmations. The FBI had been notified, but the local team had authorization to proceed given the critical time element. If Marla was telling the truth, minutes could mean the difference between saving lives and arriving at another crime scene. Newark appeared as an urban scar on the horizon. Abandoned buildings, broken streets, the unmistakable smell of industrial neglect. Riverside Drive was exactly as Marlowe had described. A row of decaying warehouses, their broken windows like empty eye sockets, staring out at the polluted river beyond. Number 47 stood out only for its reinforced steel door, incongruous with the surrounding decay. The SWAT team positioned themselves with military silence, weapons ready, as a technician approached the numeric keypad next to the door. Delgado held his breath as the numbers were punched in. 8372. A mechanical click. The door opened. The basement revealed itself in layers. First, the absolute darkness, a black so thick it seemed to have physical substance. Then, as tactical flashlights cut through the void, beams of light revealed dust particles suspended in the stagnant air. The smell came last. Dampness, mold, and something more primitive. Fear crystallized into molecules. "Police!" The SWAT commander's voice echoed in the confined space. "If anyone is here, identify yourself." Silence. Then, a sound so quiet Delgado thought he'd imagined it. A muffled sob coming from the depths of the basement. The team, advanced in tactical formation, guns pointed, every corner methodically checked. Delgado and Maria followed behind, their own weapons drawn, but pointed down. The basement was larger than it looked from the outside, a labyrinth of narrow corridors and makeshift rooms, plywood partitions creating irregular cubicles. In the third room on the left, they found the first child. He was a boy, maybe 8 years old, huddled on a dirty mattress in the corner. His eyes were huge in his thin face, reflecting the flashlight beams like a nocturnal animal's. He wore clothes that were too big, stained, with a grime Delgado preferred not to identify. When the light hit him, he shrank further against the wall, covering his face with his 2 thin arms. "Hey, it's okay." Maria immediately holstered her weapon, kneeling at a safe distance. Her voice took on a maternal tone Delgado rarely heard. "You're safe now. We're the police. No one is going to hurt you." The boy didn't answer, but his eyes moved cautiously to Maria, assessing, calculating. Delgado recognized that expression. He'd seen it in victims of extreme trauma. The child was deciding if he could trust this, if this wasn't just another cruel trick in an endless series of them. "Are there other children here?" Maria asked gently. "We can help them too." A minimal nod. The boy raised a trembling hand and pointed down the hall. The SWAT team was already moving. Over the next 15 minutes, they found 3 more children, a girl of about 6 hidden inside a locker, mute and with glazed eyes. A teenager of maybe 13 chained to a rusty radiator, his ankle raw from escape attempts. And another girl, 10 or 11, who started screaming when they saw her, a high-pitched, inhuman sound that chilled Delgado's blood. "We need ambulances," he said into his radio, fighting to keep his voice steady. 4 children all needing immediate medical attention, and child protective services. Now. Maria was with the chained teenager, a set of lockpicks in her hands, working meticulously on the lock. The boy watched her in silence, tears tracing clean paths down his dirty face. When the chain finally gave way, he didn't move, just continued to sit there, massaging his injured ankle with mechanical movements. "What's your name?" Maria asked softly. "Marcus." The voice was a hoarse whisper barely used. "Marcus Chen is..." Is my mom looking for me? We're going to find out, Maria promised, though Delgado saw the doubt in her eyes. How many of these cases ended with families who had given up, assumed the worst, and moved on? How long have you been here? Marcus stared into space as if counting internally. I don't know. Weeks? Months? They move us sometimes. Different places. This is the third one, I think. Delgado moved closer, kneeling to get on the boy's level. Marcus, I need you to be very brave right now. Can you tell me who they are? Who brought you here? Fear flashed across the teenager's face like a cloud passing over the sun. I can't. They said if we told, they would kill our families. They have our addresses, our pictures, they know where everyone lives. They can't hurt you now, Delgado said with a conviction he didn't fully feel. You're under police protection. We're going to keep you and your family safe. That's what they told Sarah, Marcus murmured, and something in the way he said the name made Delgado's stomach churn. She tried to escape once at the other place. They caught her. We heard her screaming all night. The next day she wasn't there anymore. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Delgado exchanged a look with Maria, seeing his own horror reflected back. This was bigger, more organized, and infinitely more sinister than they had imagined. Paramedics arrived with stretchers and thermal blankets. The children were wrapped in crinkling foil, like small, traumatized astronauts being prepped for launch. The youngest girl still hadn't spoken a word, just clutched the tattered teddy bear they found beside her as if it were a life raft. As the ambulances departed, sirens cutting through the Newark twilight, Delgado remained in the basement, taking in every detail. The forensics team was already at work, photographing, collecting evidence, searching for any clue about who kept this place running. In one of the makeshift rooms, they found a whiteboard with a scrawled calendar. Dates, times, numerical codes that made no immediate sense. A row of names, some crossed out, others circled. Delgado took pictures of everything with his phone, a personal backup in case the official chain of custody was compromised. Delgado, you need to see this. Maria's voice came from a room they hadn't fully checked yet. He found her, standing before a wall covered in photographs. Dozens of them, pinned with thumbtacks in a pattern that suggested systematic organization. Children. All children. Some of the photos were professional, headshots, as if for a catalog. Others were clearly taken without the subject's knowledge. In parks, leaving schools, playing in backyards. My God, Delgado murmured. It's a catalog. They're cataloging targets. Maria pointed to a specific section of the wall, photos with a red X drawn over them. These are the ones who were taken. Do you recognize any? Delgado forced himself to look closer, comparing the faces with the missing persons cases he knew by heart. This one, he pointed to a Latino boy with dark hair. He disappeared from Sacramento 6 months ago. And this girl? Christ, she's from Portland. The case went national for a week before it dropped out of the news. We're looking at an interstate, possibly international operation, Maria said, her voice tense. This is trafficking on an industrial scale. A SWAT technician appeared at the door. Detectives, we found a laptop hidden in a false panel. It's password protected, but our tech team is working on it. Top priority, Delgado ordered. Everything on that machine could be our only link to whoever is running this. His phone vibrated. Unknown number. Delgado hesitated, then answered. Delgado. Detective. The voice was distorted, run through some kind of electronic modulator. You've just made a very serious mistake. Delgado's blood ran cold. Who is this? I'm someone who now has to make adjustments to the plans. The children you rescued today? They were low-value merchandise. Returns, defectives, too problematic to be profitable. You've done the cleanup work for us. You're a monster. Delgado spat, signaling frantically for Maria to trace the call. I'm a businessman, the voice corrected. And business continues, detective, despite your heroic interferences. But since you've shown yourself to be so persistent, perhaps it's time to raise the stakes. Do you have a family? Detective Delgado? A sister in Boston, if I'm not mistaken. A 9-year-old niece named Isabella. Beautiful child. Dark hair, just like yours. Delgado's world narrowed to a single point of cold terror. If you touch a hair on her head, then cooperate. Turn over Vincent Marlowe, all the evidence. You collected today, and maybe, just maybe, your family will remain of no interest to us. The line went dead. Delgado stood motionless, the phone still pressed to his ear, though the dead line emitted only an electronic hum. His mind processed the implications in layers. They knew about Isabella. They knew about his sister. They had done their homework, turning his job as an investigator into a deadly personal vulnerability. Delgado? Maria's voice brought him back. What happened? You're white as a sheet. He lowered the phone slowly, as if the device might explode. They called me. Whoever is running this, they threatened my niece. Maria went rigid. We need immediate protection on your family. Now. And that's exactly what they want, Delgado replied, his voice taking on a hard edge that surprised even himself. To distract me, to make us back down, to turn this from an offensive into a defensive. Your niece is 9 years old, and there are dozens of other 9-year-olds in these pictures. He gestured to the wall of horror behind them. If I back down now, if we back down, they all remain merchandise. They all continue to be bought, sold, used, and discarded. Maria studied him with sharp, people-reading eyes. So what are you proposing? A double game, Delgado said, his mind already assembling the puzzle. They want Marlowe? We'll give them Marlowe. But not before we have everything we need from him first. They returned to the precinct 2 hours. Later, the car silent except for the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the police radio. Delgado had called his sister during the drive, using a code they'd established years ago when he first joined the force. I'm planning a surprise visit, meant imminent danger. That nice hotel we stayed at meant a pre-established safe house. She didn't ask questions, just confirmed she understood and hung up to start moving. At the precinct, Marlowe was waiting in the interrogation room, his lawyer beside him looking significantly less confident than hours ago. The news of the rescue had spread quickly, and he knew his client was sinking into much deeper, darker waters than a simple corporate corruption case. Delgado entered without ceremony, throwing a thick folder onto the table. Photographs spilled out. The children, the basement, the macabre catalog on the wall. Your client wants to make a deal? He said without preamble. Then here it is. Names, addresses, the full organizational structure, who's at the top, who the operators are, where the other locations are. Everything. Marlowe looked at the photos, and for the first time, something like genuine remorse crossed his face. I didn't know about this. The children, I swear I didn't know. But you knew about something, Maria pressed. The files you stole, the documentation you were moving through encrypted channels. You knew you were facilitating something illegal. Financial transactions. Marlowe admitted, his voice small. Moving funds through shell companies. I thought it was money laundering, maybe drug trafficking. But this, he gestured helplessly at the photographs. This is another category of hell. The lawyer leaned in to whisper something, but Marlowe brushed him off. No, I'm not protecting these people. Not from this. For the next 90 minutes, Marlowe talked. Names emerged, some expected, others shocking. A local councilman, 2 tech executives, a Hollywood producer, a pastor. The network spread like the roots of a rotten tree, infiltrating every level of society. The operational core is in Seattle, Marlowe said, his voice flat with the weight of confession. A company called Lighthouse Solutions. Officially, they do HR consulting. In reality, they coordinate the transport logistics. There's a CEO, someone known only as Shepard. I've never seen his face. All communication was through encrypted proxies. Lighthouse Solutions, Maria scribbled furiously. Do we have jurisdiction to investigate? With what he just gave us? Yes, Delgado confirmed. But we need to move fast. If they really called me, They already know we found the basement. They'll be erasing tracks, moving assets, possibly eliminating witnesses. His phone vibrated again. Another unknown number. Delgado answered on speakerphone. Detective. The same distorted voice. I see you've chosen not to cooperate. Disappointing, but not unexpected. If you've hurt my family, your family is perfectly safe. For now. But let me be clear about your options. You can continue this crusade, arrest a few mid-level people, feel like a hero, and wake up every day for the next few years wondering if today is the day we take what you love. Or, Delgado said, keeping his voice neutral. Or you recognize that this is bigger than you, bigger than any one investigation. You go back to your life, protect your own, and let forces you don't understand continue their work. Marlo was watching Delgado intently, recognizing the moment of choice. Maria had her hand near her weapon, as if she could somehow shoot through the phone lines. Delgado took a deep breath. I have a counteroffer. You turn yourself in now, cooperate fully, and maybe, just maybe, when you're inevitably arrested, you'll be asking for witness protection instead of the death penalty. Silence. Then, laugh. Genuine, amused. You've got guts, detective, I'll give you that. But guts don't stop the inevitable. We'll be in touch. The line went dead again. He's right, you know, Marlo said softly. About this being bigger than you. These people, they have resources, connections, power you can barely imagine. Even with everything I've told you, you'll probably catch 10, maybe 20 mid-level operators. The ones at the top, they'll just retreat, regroup, rebuild. Maybe, Delgado agreed. But every person we arrest is a child saved. Every network we dismantle is a family that stays whole. You don't change the world all at once. You change it one decision at a time. 3 months later, Delgado was sitting on a bench in the Boston Common, watching Isabella play on the playground. His sister was a few feet away, vigilant but trying to look relaxed. 2 disguised federal agents were scattered around the area, protection that had become constant since the investigation exploded nationally. Lighthouse Solutions had been raided simultaneously by FBI teams in 4 states. 37 arrests. 62 children recovered. And yes, Marlo was right. The big fish had escaped, vanishing into non-extradition jurisdictions or behind legal walls built by $1,000 an hour lawyers. But Shepard had made a mistake. A single traceable bank transfer back to a real account. A name, David Chenol, a former Microsoft executive, philanthropist, family man. He was currently awaiting trial in federal lockdown, his $50 million bail denied. Delgado's phone vibrated. A text from Maria. New lead in Portland. Possible location of Sarah, the girl Marcus mentioned. You in? Delgado looked at Isabella, her clear laughter filling the spring air. He looked at his sister, whose eyes met his with silent understanding. He looked at the agent's constant reminders of the price of justice. He typed his reply. Always. Because Marlo was partly wrong. You don't stop the inevitable. But you can challenge it, slow it down, fight it one battle at a time. And sometimes, just sometimes, you rescue one child who would have been forgotten. One life that matters. And that, Delgado decided as he put his phone away and walked toward his niece, would have to be enough. Until the next call, the next lead, the next battle in the endless war, he would always answer.